Hey guys, it's Raul again, and today I'm bringing you my monthly recommendations for the month of January. So monthly recommendations, as always, is a group created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla from the channel Kayla Rain. I will link both of their channels down below, as well as the Goodreads group for you guys to join in and recommend books with us every month. So for the month of January, the topic is historical fiction. I originally filmed a video for this topic last week, but then I kind of realized that I had a couple of other books to add into it, and I only had 2 books for that original video, so you guys will see kind of this video pieced together with the one that I originally filmed last week to kind of add to this list. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. I think I have a total of 4 books in all to recommend to you guys, so let's just go ahead and get started. The first book being All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a World War II historical fiction, and it follows 2 perspectives, one of them being a Nazi soldier, and the other about a blind girl who lives with her uncle in Paris, and their stories kind of within World War II and everything that's going on within like the Nazi invasion and everything, and I absolutely adored this book. I loved Marie Laure. I know that I've mentioned this book before, and I've mentioned the main character before in a lot of my other videos and everything, and I've talked about multiple times about how much I love this book, and it's got really short chapters, which is great because it moves along so quickly. Like a book this big, you wouldn't expect it to move along as fast as it does, and it does, and it is awesome because it keeps you engaged, it keeps flipping between the 2 perspectives and everything, and you kind of never really lose track of what's going on, which is awesome. Sometimes within books that have multiple perspectives, you tend to kind of lose track of what's going on and who's who and whose perspective you're reading from, but this book does a really good job at kind of keeping you engaged and separating the 2 stories and then eventually kind of weaving the 2 together toward the end, and I loved it. It was beautifully told, it was heartfelt, it was just like an amazing book, and it is kind of, I feel like the perfect time of year to read historical fiction because they tend to be kind of like really nice to read during the winter and everything, but I highly recommend All the Light We Cannot See. I know a lot of people have read it so far, and I believe they're making a movie out of it, which I'm super excited to go watch whenever that decides to come out. And the second book that I have to recommend for you guys is one that I have not stopped talking about since I read it, and it ended up being my favorite book of 2016, but that is The Red Umbrella by Cristina Diaz-Gonzalez. And this is a book that I feel like can fall into historical fiction. It only took place in the 1960s, but it is a huge historical event that is still considered, I feel, to be part of a larger history and everything. And this takes place in Cuba when Fidel Castro was first coming into power, and kind of all of the things that he started to slowly incorporate. And there were rumors going around when Fidel started kind of taking power within Cuba and everything that the government was actually going to take possession of the children. So the government was actually going to be the one to decide what children were going to do for the rest of their lives, what their majors were going to be in school and everything, what jobs they were going to have and everything. So people started to become really frightened about what was going to happen within the future of their own children because they thought they were not going to have a say within their children's upbringing and everything. So they started putting children into planes and sending them to the United States to be parts of like these big group homes run by the Catholic Church that was taking in all of these refugee children and everything. And it kind of like in the hopes that one day the parents would actually come and get them in the United States. Unfortunately, a lot of parents weren't able to ever come back to come into the United States to get their children. So a lot of these kids ended up actually like being by themselves and growing up on their own and growing up within kind of like the foster system within the United States and everything, and not really knowing what was going on. This book follows Lucia, our main character, when she is sent with her brother to the United States, and kind of their story as they kind of get to these big group homes within the Catholic Church, and then eventually kind of get placed into a foster home, and then their lives and their stories as they try and kind of deal with all of these new things that are going around them, and dealing with kind of this culture shock and this new life that they have, and praying and hoping that they one day are able to see their parents. It is an absolutely beautifully told and written and heart-wrenching story that you guys can definitely read in one sitting because it is so short. And yeah, I just absolutely loved this book. I loved kind of the topics that it dealt with. I loved how beautiful it was and how well it told kind of these stories, because for you guys who do not know, my wife is a Cuban immigrant, so I've heard a lot of stories from like her and her parents and everything of how things used to be in Cuba and everything. So this is definitely a book that I feel does really well at portraying kind of life in Cuba and kind of the things that people feel and experience when they first come to the United States and that culture shock that they have to deal with and everything. So this is definitely a wonderful, wonderful book to check out. If you guys are interested in historical fiction at all, I highly, highly recommend this book, and I've talked about it so many times on my channel, but I will not stop talking about it because this is probably one of my favorite books of all time at this point, and I absolutely adored this book. So the next book that I have to recommend for you guys is by an author that I have mentioned a couple of times on my channel before, but haven't mentioned her recently, and that is Tosca Lee, this book being Heba, the Story of Eve. This is more of kind of a biblical historical fiction. She writes beautiful, beautiful biblical type historical fictions, and this one focuses on Eve, the first woman, and kind of her story of kind of being created and coming to this earth for the first time, meeting Adam, and kind of her story in kind of the garden and everything. So if you guys are familiar with like biblical type stories and everything, this is definitely one that you guys should check out. If you guys are interested in Christian fiction at all, this is definitely an author that I highly, highly recommend. But this is more kind of like giving more personality and humanizing more somebody that you normally don't really hear much about. Like even in the Bible, Eve and Adam are kind of really touched on very briefly at the beginning and then very quickly move on to kind of other people and everything in the Bible. So I love the fact that this one gets really, really detailed and kind of gives more life to somebody who you don't really talk about that much. And then the next book, also by Tosca Lee, that I have to recommend for you guys is Iscariot, and this is the story of Judas. So for you guys who don't know, Judas, the man who betrayed Jesus, and it's kind of telling us his story of when he was a child and kind of growing up and eventually meeting Jesus, and the events that kind of eventually led to him betraying Jesus and kind of turning him over to the soldiers that led later on to his crucifixion. So again, if you guys are interested in Christian fiction, another highly, highly recommended book, another highly recommended author. I thought it was done beautifully. Again, I loved kind of getting into the mind of what a lot of people consider to be one of the villains of kind of the biblical sense, you know, having him been such a big part of Jesus' crucifixion and everything. I thought it was another fantastically done book, fantastically written. Again, I love Tosca Lee's writing, so it's one that I highly, highly recommend again to you guys. So yeah, guys, that is it for my monthly recommendations for the month of January. Comment down below and let me know what your favorite historical fictions are. If you guys have read any of the books that I have recommended to you guys today, what your thoughts were and everything. Thank you guys all again for watching, and I will see you all next time.